Hi, everybody. It's Calico again. And I was just sitting with my mother in mind. Um, Yesterday or whenever I did the other recording, it was really looking at my father and how much I loved him, and the lessons I really learned from him were huge. It takes me back to the 60s and Est and Werner Erhard. I remember Werner was talking about um, the Est leaders back then. He said the one thing they really had to do was clear all with their parents. And so I just invite you to really look at what you're still hanging on to with your parents, because you can cut through a lot of judgments if you can get clear on what you're still harboring as a judgment about your parents, because all that has to be cleared out. And anyway, with that being said, I want to just share about my mom a little bit. We had, as people like saying, we had a complicated relationship. The reality is, my mother, before she passed, she even said, she said, "How come you and I have had such a difficult time being a mother and daughter? And why are we still you know, talking to each other?" And it was, I think, a lot of it. My mother said this. She said, I think both of us are too stubborn to give up on each other. And so we stuck with it. And towards the end, I was, going and visiting my mother once a month in Los Angeles and spending a few days. And it was just delightful time. And a lot of it was spent in silence, just sitting with each other. And it was such a beautiful thing. But our relationship started out bumpy. Again, everything is a lesson I would learn. And since, for some reason, I selected the parents, or some parents were selected for me to give me my greatest lessons. And for me, one of the great lessons in this life has been an accepting of my form as perfect, not wanting it to change at all, not wanting it to be different at all. And my mother, um, she was, I would say, anorexic before there was a term for anorexia. She, I knew this is, I don't say this is something that I would want any child to know about their parents, but I knew my mother's waist size. She was 5'9", and her waist size was 24 inches. And I knew that at a very young age, like that was good. In my mother's eyes, that was good. But she lived this life of thin is best, fat is bad. And, my brother was a thinster. I don't remember myself as being heavy, but who knows? In my mom's eyes, I was. And so she'd buy like donuts and stuff, and they were for my brother. They weren't for me. And I had different meals set before me. And God, it was out of her love now. I so get she was trying to, feed me the best food possible. And in her mind, and I heard it a lot, if you'd lose a few pounds, you'd be so much prettier. And my mother was a beautiful woman, and you can still talk to, people in my family, her family. Oh, Edie, she was such a beautiful woman. And it's like, and so it was a standard that I lived with, attempting to be like my mom. And I really like to say, I mean, I don't know if you know Cher and Chastity, her daughter Chastity. My mother is more like an outward picture of Cher and Chastity. I just wasn't, in her mind, as good as I could be. And she wanted me to be the best that I could be, which, I get from her experience. That was good. That will get you far. People will like you. You'll get married to someone with, more standing or whatever. I mean, she had a lot of beliefs attached to looks. And so our relationship was, you know, constantly, I remember in the 60s, remember assertiveness training courses. I took this assertiveness training course, and I remember the only thing I wanted to deal with was my mother, and really get a conversation to tell her with love that all I really wanted to do was have her let go of being concerned about my weight. I was an adult, I think I was 22. I was an adult, and I'll handle it now, Mom. You don't have to handle it. And for most of my life, I was extremely, average, whatever that means. And it wasn't until I got diagnosed with cancer that it really came up as the judgment of all judgments for me to forgive. I knew stepping on the scale was never my friend, and I got rid of the scale with Holy Spirit early on because I'd step on it, and depending on the numbers that showed up, I'd either feel good or bad, or I'd have a good day or a bad day. And quite frankly, they were all bad days, because as soon as I saw that number, if I had dropped a pound, then I would live in fear of gaining that pound back. If I had gained a pound, then I was beating myself up because I wasn't the right size. So it really was a huge, huge area of judgment of myself. And again, it had really nothing to do with my mother, but I came in to learn that God, I'm a loving thought in the mind of God. God will love me no matter what I look like. I can have one leg, I can have one eye, I can be, 500 pounds, or I can be 98 pounds. God does not care. God just loves. Everything is a lesson I would learn. And I came to forgive myself for beating myself up. And it's been excessive my whole life. I mean, it's always, around meals were never comfortable, because I was always always in the background, just, is this a good food or a bad food? I had everything regimented in mind. So when I got cancer, I went into hospice. And one of the things, I had uterine cancer, and it had metastasized into probably liver, kidney, lung, whatever. And all of the symptoms that were listed on this particular type of cancer says you'll lose weight. That's when you can tell you're in the grips and throes of cancer, you lose weight. I gained weight. I was living on, just prior to hospice, I was living on in Santa Fe. They had a wonderful organization, Kitchen Angels, and they would deliver one meal to me a day. It wasn't an excessive meal, it was one meal. And that's what I was living on for the year before I entered hospice. And I put on 100 pounds. It was like, how can this be? And I remember Nook Sanchez saying, food does not make you fat. Food does not make you fat. And it was clearly not by what I was eating. But then I realized, oh, it's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking fat thoughts, fear of fat. It was huge in my world. And so with cancer, oh man, I remember telling it really disturbed me. Before I got it, it was just my mind that needed clearing. It was like, I would rather die thin than live fat. That's how much I harbored a resentment against a fat form. And so the forgiveness was very deep, deep, deep. And it started with my mother, but I didn't hold her responsible for it. She just came in as a beautiful, thin woman, and she wanted her daughter to be beautiful and thin. And she thought thin was beautiful. So, here's just, I like to bring it back to A Course in Miracles. There's a couple of sentences. You cannot behold the world and know God. Only one is true. So I could not behold the world. My body is part of the world. It appears to be fat. I cannot behold the fat form and know God. Only one is true. And in my mind at this point, it's clearly God. Yeah, the world has very little to offer me. I have a single desire, the peace of God, and anything else really needs to go because it's not serving me at all. So I had this belief that fat is bad and thin is good. The belief is fat is bad. And I really, oh boy, it it took me on a journey because really I wasn't clearing the belief that fat was bad. I was clearing any time there was a thought that came through that I'm not okay, or judging another, oh, they need to take a little weight off. That was a biggie. And then I mean, I took all these beliefs to Holy Spirit to see them differently. That's all I did. And then there's all the judgments of people, just, they're mean, they're not kind, they're stingy, all those thoughts of others had to be handled. And so that's why I say, watch your thoughts like a hawk, because in the thoughts is where you have to clear. That's where you have to forgive for having those judgments. Because they're just a thought in mind. They're not true, but we say them enough, they become very true, very true. And this turned into a lifestyle for me. This turned into a career for me, quite frankly. I became a chiropractor, and then I started using um, diets to assist organ systems in the body. Um, and I had a diet for every single organ system. And, get off gluten, stay away from dairy, avoid sugar, no coffee, just depended on what they had going on. And the reality of it is none of that's true. But unfortunately, if we say it enough, then we start believing it. And if we talk about it enough, then we have agreement. Oh, yeah, gluten, bad, bad. I remember gluten. Gluten was not a thing. And I remember in practice, I went to oh, I know exactly where it was. I went to a vegan place in San Diego, very well-known one. And, their whole thing was gluten is a killer. And so I came back and put that into practice and started spreading that around. And, there were a lot of us doing it. It wasn't just me. And so gluten became the enemy, just as sugar became the enemy. I mean, it's not the food that's the problem. It's how we hold the food in mind. Do we see it as a problem? Then it's going to be problematic. But the reality is, what's the lesson I would learn by holding on to these food thoughts of this is good, this is bad? I mean, it doesn't mean that you're going to gain weight or lose weight. It doesn't mean. My particular lesson was fear of fat. So gaining weight was perfect for me, perfect of forgiveness. It's like, okay, can I have the peace of God in a fat form? Is that even possible? And it took, I mean, I had to clear a lot. And then, if I was around conversations that discussed, foods and this is good, that's bad, initially I had to separate from myself from those conversations because they would trigger me. And I knew it had nothing to do with the food. It had to do with my belief about the food. And that needed to be seen through the eyes of love. Because if I keep bringing it back to, does God care if I can eat gluten or not eat gluten? Does God care if I eat sugar or not eat sugar? No, God doesn't. God just loves. God knows nothing of this world. Holy Spirit can see both dimensions, the truth, the love, the pure consciousness of who I am, and Holy Spirit can see the life experiences that I'm having that may be more difficult for me to clear. So when I ask Holy Spirit to see it differently, it shifts, and it may take some time. I'm not going to say the fear of fat. I want to say, oh, I think it took me a good 5 years to clear that one. It didn't just happen. And it was just anytime I'd sit down to a meal and I'd think, oh my God, potatoes. I can't eat potatoes today. I've had too many starches or whatever I would think. And it's like, let it go. What makes you happy? What can you eat guilt-free and with joy? And that was a whole new experience for me. So, give it time. If you've got food issues, just give it time. It's not going to be immediate. And then if they've told you, oh, you'll really get sick with this, I say, stay away from the food that they say you're really sensitive to and start with other ones. If you're, really feel like gluten intolerance is a thing, then start with sugar, or whatever else you like eating. If you're a vegetarian because you feel that's the only way to go, really look at that as a belief. You believe animals are getting, slaughtered or whatever it is, and really look at that and start seeing it differently. I mean, I don't know how many different exercises I've given people to just go out and have a bowl of ice cream. You don't like sugar? Great. I want you to go out and have a bowl of ice cream and watch your thoughts while you're eating it. Is there a lot of guilt coming up because you're eating a bowl of ice cream? Take it to Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, help me see this different. I really want to enjoy this bowl of ice cream. So, let's see. Yeah, food is just a distraction. Weight was never the problem. It was food being a distraction from going deeper within. And so the distraction was to avoid seeing the perfection of me as I am. Here's a great passage. And again, it goes back to this. You cannot behold the world and know God. Only one is true. And this is from chapter 8. You cannot behold the world and know God. Only one is true. I am come to tell you that the choice of which is true is not yours to make. If it were, you would have destroyed yourself, which I nearly did. Yet God did not will the destruction of his creations, having created them for eternity. His will has saved you, not from yourself, but from your illusion of yourself. He has saved you for yourself. And that's basically so that you can really enjoy the perfection of you, because that's really all there is to do, is to enjoy you as perfection. And it's not a form, it's a conscious mind state. Because again, what we're clearing is the mind. That's the healing in this lifescape that we've created. The healing comes from healing the mind. It has nothing to do with form. Here's another one from chapter 8. Let us glorify him who the world denies. That's fat. See, the world denies fat. Let us glorify him who the world denies, for over his kingdom the world has no power. That's the truth. We're eternal. It's just like there's no death. This is all A Course in Miracles. There is no death because my mind is eternal. The form will slip away at some point. It's inconsequential. It means nothing. The mind, and that's why you want to clear as much as you possibly can while you're in form, because that's the only time you can really clear it. Because once we drop the body, we go back into pure consciousness, and whatever happens after that, I have no idea. Oh, yeah. If you have any judgment of form, I encourage you to read chapter 8, The Treasure of God. It's all about the extension of our light, not criticism. And all I can say is any criticism needs to be cleared because it's a judgment. So even if you're thin and you're judging fat people, guess what? You have a fear of fat. You might as well just start, Holy Spirit, help me see it differently every time you label someone as fat or think you're getting fat or whatever. It's the peace of God is in mind, and the eternal is in mind. It's not in form. And once you see this, it's like there's no fear of death, because it's just you're going to slip back into your eternal mind from whence you came when you were born. So there you go, folks. For today, that's my mom, and I'm so grateful for her for initiating this lesson because without her, I wouldn't have seen it as the lesson that it is. Now, they've changed all the little icons on my Zoom, and I'm trying to see.